And you're live.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to Radio 5G. This is Michael Henry Dunn here on September 11th, 2019, with my co-host Nancy L. Hopkins. And we are, of course, a joint project of Cosmic Reality Radio and the Sacred Academy of Global Evolution in Crestone, Colorado. And we are looking forward this morning to welcoming back our friend and special guest, Falcon Britt. Had some technical difficulties earlier, which we are hoping will be alleviated soon. We're expecting to have Falcon join us pretty quickly here. And we will be focusing today, we've brought everybody up to speed as best we can on the latest developments with the many ways we have of stopping the rollout of 5G on the political level, the civic action, activism, protest level, particularly the very effective method that's being used these days to, given the definition of criminal assault, meeting what's happening with 5G, such that criminal charges can immediately be filed through your local police station based on the traditional definition of criminal assault as being an invasion and threat to one's safety and one's home. So all those things are valid and important. We've brought you many facts through such experts as our friend Mark Steele, and some of what we have shared from the really effective 5G Crisis Summit. And again, you can go to 5gsummit.com to tune into the really excellent speakers that they're having there. And occasionally, we will just choose to focus on the metaphysical aspect, the consciousness aspect of the waking up of humanity's soul and our awareness of ourselves as a family, our awareness of this earth as our home, as a conscious being, taking the Gaia theory a few steps further into actual direct relationship with this being that is our planet. And it's one of the great things about our guest this morning, Falcon Britt, is that like us here at Radio 5G, she straddles both worlds. She's a really effective, extremely well-informed activist, many years as an educator, but also very immersed in her own spiritual study and practice. Very sensitive to everything that's going on with the increase in electromagnetic sensitivity and how that's affecting more and more people. Because let's remember, 5G is not about, we've transcended 3G and 4G, now it's on to 5G. No, it's densification. The 3G and 4G harmful EMF and Wi-Fi is still going to be all around us with the added lethal millimeter microwave radiations of 5G. So that is producing more and more electromagnetic hypersensitivity, such that people who are dealing with this find they can't be in what we are calling a normal work environment in a lot of municipalities these days. EMF and Wi-Fi are just the cumulative effect is getting out of hand. So I'm hoping that we've solved some problems here. And good morning, Nancy. And we've got plenty to talk about if we've got Falcon to talk with. How's it?
Okay, she's up. Okay, I'm going to call her. I'm going to stop this call we've got and call her and try to get us all three of us on the same page, okay? Michael?
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to hang up on you, and then I'm going to call her and get you back on. So just be patient. Be patient, everybody.
Hang in.
We'll be right back.
Here we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh my God, yes I can. Okay, excellent. Now let me bring
Well,
Michael.
that was new.
Okay, let me bring... Are you all right? Breathe. Okay, let me get Michael into this conversation and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
I hope. Michael, answer your... There he is. Michael.
Okay, I'm here.
And so isn't our friend Falcon Britt.
Hallelujah. All right.
All right. Hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, good.
Well, welcome, Falcon. How you doing today?
Oh, it's a beautiful morning here. We had rain overnight, which in High Plains, New Mexico, is a beautiful and appreciated thing.
Right. Yeah, we had some astonishing rainbows up here in Crestone in the San Luis Valley within the last few days. Just happened to step out the front door, and where I am, we are facing Mount Challenger, just about half a mile or so away. And I sent the picture I took to Nancy down there in Florida, and the colors of this rainbow, double rainbow, were so intense, just really off the charts intensity of color in a rainbow like I've never seen before. And let's see, what was your remark, Nancy? I think you said, yeah, this is the new Earth reality coming in, something like that?
Yes, I said that the new reality was bleeding through the old reality.
Yeah, there you go.
That's interesting because Aluna Ash was talking this week about how the colors, there will be different colors in the sky, and they will even vary from day to day. That's what her team is showing her. So we'll see.
All right. Well, so yeah, we're going to let ourselves just really explore and immerse in all these aspects. You know, it can get a little daunting as you're dealing with the 3D reality of fighting the rollout. And there's all kinds of good news on that front. Particularly with the 5G Crisis Summit, that the information that's being brought in, more than 900 small cell 5G towers have been shut down using the criminal assault approach.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and there's 2,000, I think, maybe it's applications that have been stopped using this approach. So you're still not seeing it in mainstream media. It's the happy talk about the wonderful downloads you'll get. Except for an occasional editorial that'll sneak into the New York Times, where they'll go, the 5G threat to your health that doesn't exist. Headlines like that.
Well, let's talk about some other things here that don't exist. When I wrote a letter to the paper talking about the effects of 5G, right beside it, they posted someone else's letter, and they put it in much bigger print. They edited mine down. His was quite large and in large print. But what's fascinating is when somebody else went into research who had written this letter, he doesn't exist. There is no person by that name in Taos.
Oh, so it was a totally phony editor, a phony letter to the editor, probably by the editor.
Exactly. Who knows who wrote it? But
wow.
Whoever they are and whatever their motives are. And, of course, it was just mocking the whole business about how, we must be, idiots, basically Luddites that don't really understand anything, and we just protest because we have nothing better to do, that sort of mentality. So
let me tell you what happened to me, because I was listening, or I was on something with 5G, and they said something about a Miami-Dade commissioner saying 5G is a mess. Well, I live in Miami-Dade. Okay, so there was no link, so I put that into Google, exactly those words, and up comes, it starts to load the page, and all of a sudden there's malicious site. We were not going to let you blocked, and I'm going like, what the hell? Because as it flickered up, I saw that what the site coming up was the Miami Herald, the biggest newspaper in the state. You know what I'm going? I don't think that's a malicious site, right? But it gets better, okay?
Yeah.
So then it allows you to override Google's block and go see it anyway, right? So I push that button and it comes up with a 404 not found. And I said,
wow.
I said, you bastards. So I get, I do the same thing, but I go to Ducky or whatever it is, you know, and I get I write the second one down. It says Miami-Dade, you know, this sort of thing. And I went to, I went on that and no problem whatsoever. Absolutely no problem. So it's Google. It was Google that put that block in. And the funny thing is when I read the article, what the problem is that down here we've got the Super Bowl coming in February. So they're massively and crazy trying to put in 5G every place in Miami-Dade. Right? So they've got some of it set up and there's wires hanging from it and they're 300 feet apart they're putting these antennas. And no permitting, no permission from anybody, you know, and so the commissioner is saying, we'd be glad to have 5G in here. We want to be one of these advanced cities, but we don't want it done this way. You know, and I'm going like, oh my God. You know, if Google had a good case there, you know, sort of. I mean, but no, their logarithm said anything bad against 5G, don't let it up. It's a malicious statement. So that's the game that we're in right now. And you saw it with the paper and them. I mean, they watch everything, right? And, you know.
They do.
So don't
you're right.
trust them.
And yes, Google in particular. It is very much, I run into that. There are certain channels that bring through all kinds of information that they'd rather the public not have, and it's true on YouTube. They're even messing people's numbers over as to how many followers they have and whether you actually get notified if you've subscribed. There's very much channeling of what you get to see on many of the major controlled channels now. So people, if you want to actually get access to everything that's out there that you can learn, you're going to have to use other sites, you know,
right.
other search engines.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo is good. Also, Ecosia, E-C-O-S like Sam I-A, ecosia.org is another really good alternative search engine. I think they plant a tree for every search you do. And, you know, and they don't have these filters that are going in just so, it's just so naked and obvious now, you know, what Google is doing. And
it's been obvious in commerce for some time. It's just this control of what you are allowed to know and not know. That's a new and rather sinister angle.
Right.
Firefox is open source, and it even has some privacy functions that you can set up in there so you're not tracked.
Yeah, I was told, this is anecdotal, I haven't checked it out myself, but that if you go to Google Images and you do a search on the search terms Clinton Epstein, right? Because it's documented that Bill Clinton and on a few occasions Hillary as well were on the plane to the Epstein pedophilia island, right? They visited that place multiple times. You Google image on the search term Clinton Epstein, guess what you get? They give you a picture of Epstein with Donald Trump. That's the link they want you to make to, you know, this that whole situation. So, yeah, it's getting pretty. It's
really overt
and obvious. And I think, you know, I like to believe that people are waking up to it. You know, at least the ones who can be awakened are waking up to it. And we like to think that's you folks out there, our keenly tuned in, aware audience at Radio 5G. So, yeah, that there's this temptation to think of Google or Facebook as, you know, utilities, public utilities. Well, they should just be fair and open, and, you know, it's like your energy grid. But no, it's a private, you know, it's a public company with a board of directors with vested interests that they are protecting, and they're owned by the puppeteers of the puppeteers of the puppeteers, and the same 6 companies that, have conglomerated everything, and are controlled by, the usual suspects of 15 families, central banks, etc. This is all very well documented. So it's not surprising. We need to just do a little wake up for ourselves. It's like in the days of when newspapers first began to be consolidated by corporations who realized, these newspapers are exposing information we don't want exposed. So we should just expect that these companies, they're not public utilities for the good of all. They are publicly owned, corporations looking to increase their stock value and answering to overlords. And so that's the agenda. And because they are in cahoots with certain factions in the intelligence community, that's what we get. So anyway, we're going to move on to what we believe are some inspiring and really effective big picture ways of looking at this. And maybe, Nancy, you'd like to frame that for us today and how you see the conversation unfolding from the metaphysical angle?
Well, we can't lose the fact that it is 9/11. It's the anniversary of 9/11, the event. And that's the keystone to the change in where we are now. I mean, prior to 9/11, there was some sanity there. After 9/11, everything went insane. From 9/11 on, the actions of the United States, in particular, have been obscene. We took now, and the reason that I'm bringing 9/11 up on the 5G show is because it's 9/11, and it's an opportunity to readdress something that is so critical to the reality we're in. And we need to look at it again, because the framework of 9/11 is based on Adolf Hitler's concept of, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one. Okay? 9/11 is the biggest effing lie that has ever been perpetrated on the world. Now, the rest of the world does not believe the story. But the Americans, they want to believe that it was a bunch of crazy-ass terrorists who couldn't fly a small private prop plane, who flew these jets that aircraft pilots tell you is impossible to fly the way they flew. And they flew them into, perfect targeting.
And of course the buildings dropped neatly in place, exactly the way you would with a controlled implosion. All the engineers that have looked at this and signed off saying there's no way that this is what they say happened.
Well, that's such a fallacy. I mean, on so many points, the way that the buildings fell. But and that's exactly why don't people understand that when I tell them I am on the radio, don't bother me.
You're so popular, Nancy. They can't help themselves.
If I wasn't on radio all the time, they'd probably be able to get through. I'm just like, on certain days, I'm just on the radio. But no, the idea that the buildings, fell because let's just go through it, okay? So that people out there get it back in their heads. What the official results from the U.S. Standards and something agency that made this decision was that the gas in the planes, the jet gasoline, was burning so hot that it melted steel. Well, that's impossible. That fire would never be hot enough to melt steel. But it melted the steel where it hit, and that caused the floor to fall. Now, what do we mean by the floor to fall? Well, the Twin Towers were like, each floor was an equivalent of an acre of land. and you've got two silos. You've got a silo that's inside a core silo that's got all of the elevators and, the stuff that makes it work inside the inner silo. On the outer side, you've got the building, the glass, everything. And these two silos are connected by trusses, which is what supposedly melted. All right, so you got all of a sudden a melting, and apparently a very uniform melting because they all fell absolutely perfectly, okay, falling on the one below it. And then the weight of that caused the floors to collapse to the one below that, so now you're 3 down, right? You're going to fall 78 floors in the case of the second tower. Okay, so you're going down 78 floors, boom, 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 with the weight of the preceding ones, and it's all falling absolutely uniformly. It's not starting to topple, it's not falling apart, it's just falling, okay? Well, the thing of it is that when it hit the ground, there was a slight boom, and the timing of when the plane hit and when it sort of hit the ground, because nothing hit the ground. It was all dust before it got there. But you'd have to have 77 times, 77 times. Boom, boom, boom. Clap your hands 77 times in 11 seconds. Free fall. It was at free fall. If you can clap your hands 77 times in 11 seconds, then it's possible. But it's impossible for you to do that. Period. So the architects have been screaming about this, okay? Finally got enough clout to get the Attorney General office of New York City to reopen the 9/11 case. Not the whole scenario. The only thing they're looking at is they're making the case against this standards and whatever, U.S. standards and whatever agency, because it's such a blatant lie. It's impossible by the manner of physics. So that is where it got left. I don't know what's happening with this case because they agreed to convene a special grand jury. Now, a special grand jury is very critical because you have grand juries sitting all the time, but they're looking at many, many cases. A special grand jury is given the right to look at a specific situation. In this case, the fact that they lied about the way the buildings fell. So at that point, because it's a special grand jury, they have the right to look at anything regarding that particular situation. So a lot of the details of what happened that were never released in the official documents will be looked at. You'll hear they'll take testimony from people that were on the board that made the decision to, bless this thing, saying that, it's all a bunch of crap. They knew it. They said it. So it's like there is nothing even plausible from the moment you think in terms of these terrorists flying planes that no trained pilot could fly like they flew, and you have a building falling in a way that nobody has ever seen except for controlled demolition. And the fact of the matter is that if you want to look at it from controlled demolition, think back just before the buildings start falling. If you look at the films, you're going to see bloop, 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 burps of white dust. The only time that happens, white dust, is concrete with dynamite in it. So you actually can physically see the first blowouts. They have people that were on the phones, the firemen on the phones. And you can hear the blasts going off and them saying there's explosions in the building. I mean, it goes on and on and on. There's nothing true about this.
There's even a video someone took of you can see the charges exploding out the corners of the building as they do with controlled demolition. I hope they're able to look into the supposed millions in gold that was in the basement that had disappeared.
That's a whole other story that one version of that I happen to know something about. It's a separate rabbit hole, but all the rabbit holes link up down there. There's a piece of the global collateral accounts story which goes back to the 1930s, and the Chinese were getting invaded by the Japanese Empire, and it's the rape of Nanking, and the Japanese are coming for the gold. This is Operation Golden Lily. The Chinese knew it. They're coming for our gold. Don't worry, your nice friends in New York City at the New York Federal Reserve Bank are going to take your gold, and we're going to keep it safe until this whole thing with Japan blows over. Well, so there's New York Times stories you can look up about all this gold coming over in battleships from China in the mid-1930s to protect the national gold of China from the Japanese invasion. Well, war goes on, war ends, and then there's the communist revolution and one thing and another, and gosh, that gold just sits there in New York under the very careful, watchful eye of the honest folks at the Federal Reserve, right? So along comes Deng, and the liberalization of China, and they rejoin the modern world in terms of capitalism. And the Chinese say, hey, we'd like our gold back. And the Fed says, I'm sorry, that was such a long time ago. And, that was with, that's a nationalist China. I'm sorry, we don't know where we put it. It's been too long, and no, you don't get it. So China actually filed suit in the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, and they won. And they said, yes, these validated bonds that they have for all this gold, really plus interest, it's $1 trillion plus interest since 1934. Time for you to give that back. Well, guess what date the gold was supposed to be returned? September 10th, 2001. And we know where it was stored. So one version of this story, I'm not saying I know this is gospel fact, is that basically, when Chinese woke up on November 11th and saw that the towers had come down, it's like, right, it's basically an FU from the feds saying, hey, we're starting a war on terror, and you can forget about your gold, okay? So that's one version of the story, but yeah, there was the gold in the basement, and lo and behold, it had disappeared. And, just multiple purposes to that cover story. We're launching a war on terror, and we've already got the Patriot Act all ready to go to surrender American freedom. Let's stop with the Patriot Act, because it was already written. This thing is how many inches thick? 6 inches thick or something? I mean, it's a tremendous document. And yet, within weeks of the event, the document is ready to be okayed by the Congress. This is like, if you want to talk about pre-planning, the document, the Patriot Act, oh, right, shoot it. It's like, this was already done. This was such a preconceived notion. Do you think that if it was terrorists out in a cave in Afghanistan, do you think that they would have been able to orchestrate a unbelievable, devastating document to the freedoms of humanity, never mind America? Because you don't have any rights as an American since the Patriot Act. Yeah, this is something that ties into the 5G situation. And for folks who are just tuning in, it is September 11th, and we are all about stopping the rollout of 5G. And the parallels, to what happened 18 years ago today and what's going on now are right there in our faces. And you're talking, Nancy, about the impact of the Patriot Act. A few years back, when I was in L.A., I went to see a really riveting performance by an African-American lawyer out of Harvard Law School. And he had once been arrested in Boston because he had, a loose resemblance to some description of some guy out there, some black man who had a similar name.
Yes, existing while black.
Right. Yeah. That's actionable. You can get arrested for that. So he's saying, well, no, you don't understand. I'm a lawyer I'm just graduating from, Harvard Law. I said, yeah, right. yeah, right, dude. Just, you sit. So he sat in this cell for like 10 days. And he created, I'm sorry I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he did this riveting one-man show recounting the whole experience and putting it in the context of being black in America. And then he brought up 9/11 and the Patriot Act. And this is pretty close to a quote from him. He said, when the Patriot Act went into effect in this country, white folks got to see a little bit of what it's like to be black in this country, because suddenly your rights are gone, and suddenly you can be stopped for no reason, and suddenly you're being treated like cattle in the airports. And it's what he called, forgive, the quote here, I'm quoting him, is using the N-word, but he said, the Patriot Act was the niggerization of America, the niggerization of white America. Welcome to, a society in which you have really no rights. We pretend you do, but when a push comes to shove, say goodbye. This is a constitution-free zone now, as they call airports, right? So, yeah, it was this huge shift where Americans just went, oh, okay, man, we're under threat. Oh, they took down the Twin Towers. They, attacked the Pentagon. They could have taken out the White House. Just, keep us safe, keep us safe. It's the old mantra of how freedoms get taken away, and it's the strategy that the controllers have used for a long time. Only just like with 5G, they overstepped. They overreached. They're pushing it too soon. 9/11 was so obvious to so many people, who, particularly people in the military, people in the intelligence, people who know a controlled demolition when they see one, said, all right, that's too far. No, I am going to stand up. I am going to work with other people who see what I see. And from reports I've heard, a significant acceleration took place in the cooperation of certain factions in the military and the intelligence community, the true patriotic factions, to say, all right, that's their big move, their big, audacious, in-your-face, enormous lie to seize power and eradicate our freedoms. So it was actually the trigger, just like with 5G. They're pushing it too far, too fast. People are waking up too quickly. We're taking our power back too powerfully. We have got to roll this electronic grid of control and surveillance and, if need be, lethal action. We got to roll it out now before it's too late. And it's like with 9/11. The biggest, on one level, they thought of it as their biggest success, and it was their biggest failure because it woke so many people up, just like with 5G.
I'm not going to argue that at all. I mean, it's like, I said at the time, I said, when people realize the truth, because I knew it instantaneously. I mean, I saw the second plane, I saw the tower burning, and was listening to Good Morning America as the second plane flew in, and when it flew in, it was like, I knew, it was such a shock that it threw me into a remote view of what was really happening. So from the get-go, I saw the whole scenario unfold in front of me. And I actually saw the towers start falling. I'm looking at the television. I saw them start falling. And an instant later, they're still standing there. And it happened twice before the third time it kept going. So, it was like I was not alone in understanding. I mean, I understand the details. But one of the main things about 9/11 that I found, just stunningly interesting, was they have satellites that are turned towards the Earth, looking at the electromagnetic field of the Earth, studying it. And in the time frame just before the attacks actually occurred, and then during the attacks, and then it started to gradually drop off, there was an explosion of electromagnetic energy throughout the planet that they had never measured at those heights before. Now that's pretty stunning. That whatever is, it's almost like people anticipated something Because this is, the earth wasn't the thoughts. It's the thoughts. The people somehow or another at a subconscious level, maybe, at a super subconscious level, maybe, we as a humanity made some kind of an agreement. You'll hear, Bartzis and other people talking about the soul commitments and contracts that you make before you even get here. And when you do get here, you've got a situation where these things are happening, but you've already agreed to participate in it. So on a soul level, on a spiritual level, you can't explain the drastic increase in electromagnetic energy without addressing consciousness. And you can't do it within the time frame without addressing some kind of a unified understanding of this is a game and we're playing parts in it.
And Falcon, I wonder if you could share with us your experiences that day 18 years ago, where you were, what you were involved in, how it hit you, and what you saw happening.
Well, it's very odd because it was a day in which I was sick, and I just didn't get sick at that point in my life. I was thrilled with my teaching career, and on that day, I was at home sick and actually slept through the whole thing, which is, you'd have to know me to know how weird that is. I am extremely empathic, like off the charts. I once felt a bus go off a cliff in Japan. And I've never even been to Japan. I just had connections on a soul level with those people. So I think what happened in my case was I was working. I was out of body and up there helping those people process the exiting from their bodies and get across safely, because it's a very shocking thing on a personality level, because you don't know that you signed up for any such thing. And so I was just working, I think, on the trauma field. As a healer, I have a lot of, as a background from many previous lives and other star systems as a healer, and that's, I'm sure I was there doing things. When I woke up, it wasn't even a surprise. That was the strange thing. When you look at the TV, because when you wake up and you turn on and there's this happening or has happened and they're reporting on it, it would shock anybody. And I'm looking at it with no sense of shock. But I think I was busy. I don't know how else to put it. But my sense of not being surprised is, I think that's indicative.
Well, I was a typical asleep American on that day, not asleep like you were, helping souls on the higher level. I just mean asleep in terms of the reality of false flags, and the reality of what was unfolding. I was simply buying the story. It's those Arabs, they're never going to live this down. It's just, so appalling that they've done this. As it happened, I was in Chicago. I'm from Oak Park, a suburb of Chicago, and I was visiting my family. My brother had gotten married a couple of days before. I stayed on a day. And so on the morning of September 11th, 2001, I was getting ready to take an early cab to O'Hare Airport to fly back to Los Angeles, where I lived at the time. Well, of course, my mother wakes me up and says, Michael, you got to come look at the TV because you're not going anywhere today, because by that time they had shut down all the airports across the country. And so I sat there in stunned disbelief, and when the towers fell, and they didn't yet know how many people had actually come to work that day, how many people we had lost that day. If it had been 12 noon instead of 8:20 a.m., we would have lost that day as many people as we lost in the entirety of the Vietnam War. 50,000 people worked in those two buildings. Wow. So, people didn't yet know, of course, what the actual death toll was going to be. So when we watched the towers fall, the idea that we were watching the deaths of 50,000 people in 11 seconds, was just, you just couldn't take it in. You just simply couldn't take it in. And So in the days following, I just remembered, the grim, bleak burden of consciousness, on our shoulders as we did, just trying to accept, okay, this is the world we live in now. Everything has changed in ways that I don't even want to think about. And at that point, I'm just still blaming Arab terrorists. I'm still buying the absurd notion that it was 19 guys with box cutters and a few months of simulator training, right? And a budget of like $600,000, I think is what they said, that bin Laden was, training these guys with, whatever that story. So then finally, they reopen the skies. Planes can fly again. I've got to get back to Los Angeles because I'm coordinating a big event. It's taking place that weekend. So I was on one of the first planes that left O'Hare Airport in Chicago the day they reopened the the planes. And so I get into taxi cab coming out of River Forest, Illinois, where my folks lived, on the way to O'Hare Airport. And as it happens, my cab driver is this guy from Morocco. And it's this Arab cab driver. And he doesn't have a whole lot of English, right? But, so he's saying, oh, airport, no work, no busy, no rides, I have no rides to airport, very bad, business very bad. And I say, yeah, dude, I get it. Yeah, business is probably pretty bad. And, he's looking at me in the rearview mirror, and we're driving along. And he goes, me from Morocco, not Afghanistan. Very bad, Afghanistan. No, Osama. Oh, Osama very rich. Osama very correct. I said, great. He's on a first name basis with the guy. Wonderful. I'm in the cab with, at that point, I'm a typical American in that consciousness, buying into the fear, buying into demonizing Islam, buying into demonizing Arabs. I'm in the whole deal. And the guy is saying, oh, America, so easy to come to country. He was like, oh, come to country. Papers, no papers, okay, come to country. Europe, no. You show papers, no, come to country. This guy is just like painting the whole immigration scenario for me. So we're coming up to a viaduct on our way to O'Hare. And we're looking, and here comes a big freight train going about 45 miles an hour. It's not a viaduct, actually, excuse me. It's a crossing where the gates come down. And the guy doesn't slow down. Here comes the train going 50 miles an hour. The guy doesn't slow down. And in my American fear consciousness, I immediately go into, oh, my God, I have a terrorist cab driver who wants to take out at least one infidel by doing a suicide mission in front of this train.
Jeez, Michael.
That's where I go, because he's not slowing down, and here comes the train. And then at the very last second, he hangs a sharp left because it's just a shortcut and he knows a little viaduct. And I'm going, stop, no, don't. I'm reaching forward to the guy's steering wheel. And, he just goes, no, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut, no problem. I'm going.
Oh, my God.
It is so easy. It is so easy to trigger fear in people. It's this every same time you would think we would wake up to the game after a while, but it's the us against them fear, and they will use it to divide race against race, and men against women, and gays against straights, and Americans against Arabs, and it is so routine by now. I keep thinking, at what point does the divide and conquer strategy not become a continuously useful? They've used it for so many thousands of years. And, of course, all it does is to keep the actual powers that are ruining the earth and obliterating any possibility that humans could have around most of the world for a decent life economically, but we're tearing up forests, and we're, jungles, and I'm sorry, I know this is a bit of a rant, but I am just sick of us falling for this. We've got to quit being such patsies. They manipulate us with such glee and ease to turn us against one another. Conservative versus a liberal, and it's always a false, either a false flag that triggers, or it'll be a false narrative a straw dog, a false debate, such as it's either capitalism or it's socialism, and we'll have these big nasty arguments about all that, when there are many hybrid forms of all kinds of things. They give you an either-or polarity. They paint the other side with some kind of brush that's not accurate. And if you only watch Fox News or you only watch, particular people who rant about it, and you enjoy ranting because life is frustrating and you're angry and you're just looking for something to be angry about because you're poor, you're not really going to turn to the real situation and say, what's the fundamental problem at the root of all of this? And that's where we've got to look. We need to be like the tiger who, when a stick is thrown at it, it looks to see who threw the stick. It doesn't go chase the stick. We're still in the stick-chasing version of our consciousness, and we must wake up from that.
Yeah, it's so true. And when you look around the world, as a student of history, when you talk about the divide and conquer strategy, I see, if you look, growing up, the trouble spots in the world, potential sparks for a wider conflagration. There is, of course, the Middle East. And when, of course, there's India and Pakistan. And then there's the terrible troubles going on in Northern Ireland, between the Republic of Ireland, the IRA, and, Ulster, paramilitary groups, etc., etc. Every one of those places is where the British Empire practiced divide and conquer for centuries, leaving people bitterly opposed to one another based on generations of bloodshed and division. When the Brits pulled out of India, it's like, yes, there is definitely, the emerging India. But there are the princely states. There's a wonderful moment in Gandhi, in the movie, where, there's the India of princely states, and then there's the India of the Muslims, and then there's the India of the Hindus. Let's set up the horrific bloodshed that occurred in 1947-48 in India with partition, when Pakistan was created. And if you go to the Middle East and the Balfour Declaration in 1914, which should have been called the Rothschild Declaration, basically because that's what it was about. The Rothschilds financed the creation of Israel, and that was the geopolitical move necessary to set that up. That was setting up the Arab-Israeli conflict that persists to this day. And then, being of Irish-American heritage, I could tell you about, it's hilarious, really, if it weren't so tragic, of what's playing out now with Brexit, and that, who knows, Ireland, the two halves may be reunited just because the Brits are so bizarrely inane on this whole Brexit question. But it is this consciousness, this is what we're talking about today, about how the lever of consciousness is what they manipulated, and it's what we can grasp also now to rise above it. And when you're asking, Falcon, this question of how long are we going to buy this? How long is this going to continue to be an effective tactic? And I see two dynamics. Okay, the education system in America is being dumbed down, right? The control and censorship, like we were talking about with Google, of the internet, is being increased. And yet still, the gift and tool of the internet is so liberating in terms of information. Just the fact that here we are, the three of us, having this conversation, going out to, however many thousand people. This is going on all over the country. These, all over the world. These conversations, this awakening, this information coming to light, just hard facts, not tin hat conspiracy theory stuff, just like engineers and the reality of controlled explosions and the reality of false flags and the documented history of it all. It's all coming out, and the awakening is going faster than the dumbing down can go to stop it. That's what I believe. Now, maybe I'm just, wishful thinking, but what's your impression, and Falcon, of how those two dynamics are proceeding, the dumbing down and the awakening, and are we going to win?
My personal imprint and impression is that so much light is beginning to accrue. It's not, I would not say it's entirely the truther channels, because many of the truthers, unfortunately, are being misled and co-opted. And it's not entirely the light worker community, because that also, they're attempting to co-opt that. That's another of the tactics that has helped a lot in the past for them, is if something starts to gain momentum in a positive direction, like people wake up and realize that there is a tremendous amount of love in the human heart and we're actually caring about each other a great deal, they will try to co-opt that. But I have to say, I think the majority of people are really waking up. You can only present people with so much blatant propaganda for so long and try to claim that it's news before they start realizing, no, this isn't news. This is carefully chosen, edited, half the time complete bullshit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your show. But they're using clips that aren't even real. Even in weather, you've got people leaning sideways when there's no real wind. I saw coverage the other day of Hurricane Dorian, and he was trying to act like he was about to fall down from the strong wind. And I spoke with my mom, who lives in that area, and she said, no, the winds are at about 12 miles an hour. So you can only present people with that kind of stuff for so long, and so much opinionated, slanted, and outright lies as news before they say, no, this isn't actual. I'm not even going to listen to this anymore. And so too many people have woken up. I have to agree with you, Michael. When this much light is pouring, it's like a snowball rolling downhill. And you can't unwake yourself. When you know you're being lied to, and you know the sources where those lies are coming from, even if you don't know the particular individuals or families behind it, or even all the history behind it, people are unplugging from that, and they're looking into their local areas, and they're meeting up with wonderful people, and they're learning the positive things and the uniting and the projects that are being started around the world. And even in the consciousness movement, if people don't have a lot of time on their hands, they're still learning. They're going into meditation, and they're tapping into knowledge and real reconnection with their higher consciousness that is shifting everything. I'll give you an example. There are truthers and people who are watching shows like Ancient Alien and trying to learn the truth about our galactic history and how far has our government been involved with negative ETs, and how much technology are they keeping from the people. And, how many 100 years ahead are they with the technology that they're keeping back in order to use it for power? But what's interesting is I see an increasing number of people who are saying, wait, why should I wait like a helpless child, hoping that the government's going to now dole out the truth, the secret parts of the government that have kept these technologies from us all this time? It makes no sense to sit and watch these shows, which are being financed by somebody, and you have to wonder, which version of truth am I going to be given now? Am I going to sit here and wait for the lies and the dribbles? And it's certainly going to omit large parts of what has actually gone down, when I could actually go out, learn how to connect with aliens psychically, ETs, other dimensionals, evaluate them for myself to see which groups are trustworthy, which ones are not, and learn the facts. It's a whole different approach. I'm re-empowering myself as a human with greater consciousness. I'm not going to sit around and wait for these liars who have been lying to me for decades to try to tell me whatever spin they want to put on this, or some kind of, quote, soft disclosure that might go on for 100 years, and who knows what kind of version they'll actually dole out. We're waking up to that too, and we know that we have alternatives. And once people know they have alternatives to actually find the facts for themselves, and their abilities start coming online, and a lot of people they're waking up to their multiple dimensionality. The fact that we have aspects of ourselves in the 5th dimension, and the 7th, and the 9th, and even higher. That we are much more complicated than we realized. We're learning the falsity of linear time, from all of the higher dimensional perspectives. And once you break out of that box, once you've red pilled, you can't go back to sleep.
Yeah, it's so true. And as I'm listening to you, what's coming in for me around this, just the word disclosure. This is the approved term for, that magical day when the governments will just say, gosh, kids, we hate to admit that we've just been lying to you all this time, saying that they're weather balloons, this, that, and the other, but we've just decided it's time, and we're going to let you know this is what it really is, and here are the good aliens, and here's the bad aliens, and here's how we allowed experiments on our own people, and here's how we allowed, technologies to be suppressed that could have cured you all, and it's just time to what was that line from Watergate? Go the hangout route. I think it was John Ehrlichman said, well, we could just go the hangout route, sir, and tell them everything. No, I don't think we can do that, right? And they're going to do that now, right? So, no.
Yeah, sure they are. Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure, right. Disclosure? No, like you say, it's about discovery on your own initiative, educating ourselves on our own initiative. Because, right, whatever story they're going to feed us, we're going to buy that one. Suddenly, CNN and Fox News and MSNBC are all immaculate truth tellers with no agenda and no controllers. And suddenly it's just, gosh, they really are just going by the light of truth-seeking journalism. Isn't it wonderful that we're back in that golden era that never existed? So that's a wonderful
let me jump in here for a second, because in my opinion, the disclosure has already happened. We have a show, Say What, and every first Saturday we have Judy Carroll come on. And Judy Carroll has written like 3 books, because the first one she actually wrote as a fiction, because she wanted to tell the story of being essentially a Zeta, the tall grays, okay, who reincarnated into Earth, into an Earth body. So, and one of the books is called Human by Day, Zeta by Night. And it's sort of like when she goes to sleep, she goes up to the ship and, does a lot of things, especially regarding medically helping people, because they have the ability of, taking somebody up there and doing, medical changes to them to give them better health, because they're so critical to what's happening now. And when we were listening to her, I knew the story. I don't have any preconceived notions of what can be real and not real, so I just go into these things with, well, let's see what this is about. And we'd been into the show for, at least 45 minutes, when all of a sudden, something that Judy said made me realize, oh my God, this is true. I'm talking to a Zeta. And it was odd, because Dolly Howard, my co-host, did the same thing at the same instant, and Dolly's going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You're real, So I think the disclosure is happening. It's already happened. It's just that it's so subtle. It takes a little bit of imagining that this is even possible, but not much imagining. We reincarnate. It's like, it happens to be, my theory here is that when you are like a Zeta, okay, that died in the crash in Roswell, let's say, then you died within the energetic biological home of Earth. So you're more inclined to end up in another body in the place that you actually died. And it has to do with your heart, It's an interesting thing. But so when she reincarnated, instead of going into a Zeta body in the 3D realm, she went into Judy Carroll. And it's fascinating to hear her story of how she started to understand this connection. My point being, I believe that we should be starting to pay a lot more attention to these people that claim that they're already ETs here. We know from the conspiracy angle of it, oh yeah, they might be all around us. We don't know. So anyway, but we're at the top. We're at the top of the hour. Shall we take a break?
Sounds good to me. I've got a good follow-up when we're back on this question of, ET souls incarnating in human bodies.
Yes, I'd like to bring in the 3 Waves of Volunteers and the Dolores Cannon material.
Awesome. We'll be back in 5 minutes because this song, I've actually played it last night too. It's Diana Rose Kelly's Link Up, and it just sort of indicates to me what we need to do as a human species, the family of mankind.
Bring it on.
Women, man and women. I don't know, that family of man kind of bugs me. Let's call it the family of us.
There you go.
Back. Yeah.
And you're ready to go again.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Radio 5G. This is Michael Henry Dunn with my co-host, Nancy Hopkins, and our special guest, Falcon Leslie Britt. And we are honoring the fact that this is September 11th and remembering the some 3,000 Americans we lost that day, and doing our best to understand what happened then in terms of what's happening now with the rollout of 5G, the wake-up happening in human consciousness, rolling in questions like so-called disclosure of ET presence on the planet, and how, on the spiritual level, if you just take for granted that reincarnation is a fact of evolution simply on the level of consciousness, if you accept that, yes, there are off-planet civilizations that have been interacting with us for a very long time, the evidence for that is fairly overwhelming. And then we're looking at integrating all these realities right now as we're addressing the wake-up call to humanity that we feel, the 5G rollout is. If this doesn't do it, nothing will, in terms of destruction to the biosphere, all-pervasive surveillance net, a lethal weapon system, and it's been in the planning, as Nancy can tell you from her first-hand experience as an energy weapons specialist in the U.S. Army going back 40 years. So we're integrating this, and where we were when we left off, we were talking about the reality of a soul from another star system on this planet on some mission or purpose or other, who, for example, as happened at Roswell, there's a crash, they die on this planet, in this vibration, in this heart space, genetic space. And so could you go on to describe again, Nancy, please? You were talking about the guest you had and how suddenly it's like, okay, so a Zeta, I think it was called, suddenly is in the human body and trying to keep up the healing work, the higher level healing work she was doing. Zeta by night and a human by day. It's a pretty fascinating dynamic.
Well, her mission now is to write these books to explain it. That's why I say disclosure is being made, because people that have absolute positive knowledge of the fact that ETs are there because they are ETs are writing books, are explaining who they are and what they're doing and why they're here. It's just that even myself, I wasn't paying any attention to it until all of a sudden I realized I am actually talking to a Zeta. And it was such an overpowering awareness that it was, and I've known about, extraterrestrial brothers and sisters since I was a kid. This is not new to me. So, but it was just kind of stunning to realize that, the way they're getting to us is they're showing up on as us and saying, look it, I'm telling you, so that's what I think is why I say a lot more. If we step back and we look, there's probably a lot more disclosure than we're even focusing on, because even in the shows, these different shows that you've been referencing, not so much Ancient Aliens, but the other ones where they're dealing with are UFOs real or whatever, you know? Well, you'd start watching them, right? And Falcon was talking about this, and, you know, you'd wait, and it sounded like, okay, they're kind of, you know, telling the truth. They're getting some details in there. And then just about, you know, 45 seconds before it ends, but they go, but you know, all these people are crazy. You know, they poo-poo everything that they've done before. Well, the new programs are not doing that. They're actually like, there's one that's called Contact. It's about essentially saying what I'm saying, that it's already happened. Disclosure has already happened. Let's just get the proof out to people. And they are just going after, I mean, it's frustrating for them because they're getting details, but because they're trying to get the truth out, not stories. You don't get any feeling of, so what was that about? You know, you don't get any finalization in the way they're presenting it, but they're presenting it as it is. A lot of times you don't get the final answer. You just have to keep getting the little pieces here and there and bringing them in until you can figure out what the puzzle looks like. And so you're getting that kind of response. And also like William Shatner's Unexplained. They bring in, we know all these stories, but they're bringing it in with just what they know to be, and they'll tell you, well, this is what they say, but this is what is known, but they don't try to make any conclusions about it. It's unexplained. Here's the information. What do you think? And that is a definite change in what I'm seeing happening out there in the media world, let's say.
Yeah, they like to, what they have been doing is, oh, let's titillate you, let's fascinate you, let's say, could it be that there are alien races? Could have so-and-so had this experience? And then at the end, you know, in order to bring it back to the, you know, mainstream mindset, they do the poo-pooing thing at the end. And as I say, that's not happening so much anymore. It's, you know, what they're calling incremental disclosure, soft disclosure, slow, but when we're talking about souls, you know, off-planet souls being on this Earth, I can't resist telling you a story about that. I'm going to try to keep it to a thumbnail because it's a rabbit hole. It's a whole rabbit hole. Excuse me. And there are souls, you know, from other star systems, or let's just say there are people who believe that they are here for some work from another star system. And it just so happens that one of these souls who believed this very strongly and had very emphatic, clear experiences of it from childhood was Elvis Presley. And this is not, you know, well known. I mean, it's well known, of course, he was an incredibly magnetic performer. His influence, you know, on the culture, the rock and roll revolution, the Beatles, the 60s, none of that would have happened without It's All Right Mama, you know, in the summer of 1954 with a 19-year-old kid named Elvis Presley. But he was quickly in this, you know, first rock star, megastar world controlled by Colonel Parker, his manager, where his spiritual hunger was being suppressed because they saw really Elvis wanted to be a minister. He was so on fire for God, and the gospel music was so much a part of him. That's what he really wanted, right? So he ended up cultivating a secret circle of friends on the telephone that he could talk to about his experiences that didn't get out into the public. He couldn't talk to it about it. You know, his fans were all, you know, Christian Right, Bible Belt, a lot of those folks, and still are. And he had experiences of past lives. He had experiences of being visited by light beings from the time he was a little kid. He had experiences of being shown his future. He had experiences of where he was from. And he specifically said to a friend of his in his secret phone circle of friends, you know, and this lady actually was allowed to tape record these conversations. And they're authenticated, and we have transcripts of Elvis saying, well, you know, I'm not really from here. And I want to go home. I'm not from here. I'm from the blue star, Rigel, in the constellation Orion. And I know my home, and I miss my people, and it's burning me up. But you know, I came here too soon. I should have waited a little longer because people like me, we don't last very long. I'm not going to last very long. I know that. And so, Elvis Presley, it was like, oh, there's Elvis impersonators, it's Las Vegas, and, there's the distorted image of him that's come down from what happened when he died. But this is who that soul really was, and he had many memories of past lives in Egypt and as a high priest. So a close friend of mine who has been on this show, Reverend Maya Nartumid, wrote a book called Blue Star Love. Find it on Amazon. And when she got in touch with this friend of Elvis's he told this to, a woman named Wanda Hill, Maya had received clairvoyantly, because she's an off-the-charts Akashic translator, she had received clairvoyantly that there were souls from other systems, specifically the Blue Star Rigel in the constellation Orion, that were here with a specific mission. And she asked her inner planes guides, well, name me some people who were from this Blue Star Rigel. So, well, you can tell because they tend to have sort of a heavy-lidded, eye-lidded sort of bedroom look to their eyes, and they have, this and that kind of characteristic. So, well, like who? Names to people. So the guide said, well, Anwar Sadat, key figure in creating some semblance of peace in the Middle East, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Elvis Presley. So her inner guides told her Elvis's soul is from the Blue Star Rigel in the constellation Orion. A few years later, Wanda comes out with a book after Elvis's death and happens to, Maya reads it, gets in touch with Wanda. They're chatting. And Maya tells her, oh, by the way, I received from my inner planes guides that Elvis is actually not from here. He's from the Blue Star Rigel. And Wanda practically fainted because she had a one-on-one in-person conversation with Elvis in which he told her that he was from the Blue Star Rigel in the constellation Orion. So make of that what you will, folks. There's a whole lot more to the Elvis story than meets the eye. But that's just one example. And he was, just a hugely influential figure, beyond the stereotype we have of him. So just thought I'd share that with you.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. There's, I grew up just sort of post Elvis. I grew up in the Beatles era in terms of my taste in pop music, and just rediscovering what an amazing man he was. The charisma and magnetism that he exuded was just off the charts. There'd be guys who bring their girlfriends. Oh, my girlfriend wants to come see this Elvis thing. All right, but Elvis would walk out on stage. These guys would just be gobsmacked, as the British say, by the charisma and magnetism that just shot off this guy. His aura was completely off the charts. He would occasionally say, okay, I'm going to let some friends in on something. Let's turn off the lights in this little dark room here, folks, because I'm actually able to shoot blue light off the end of my fingers. And, he could do this. He could move objects telekinetically. It's just, the poor guy was stuck. He asked the Reverend Mother of the Self-Realization Fellowship Monastic Order, he wanted to be a monk and talk to Sri Dayamata, who's a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. And he wanted to be a monk. This is in the middle of the height of his stardom. And she said, Elvis, no, in this life, you are meant to be Elvis Presley. He said to her, why did God make me Elvis Presley? It's like, well, that's your role. You're bringing light. You don't realize the light you are bringing just through your music and the thousands of people, the millions of people that you touch. So each one of us, I think, is bringing the light that we were meant to bring and fulfilling the soul contract that we made before coming in. So, yeah, it's rolling out. I've got nothing clever or imaginative to say just at the moment, Nancy. I'm hoping you do. My mind is off in Elvis land right now.
Yeah. It is for me too. I'm kind of like reassessing so much of. I mean, I grew up with him. He's very real to me, and gosh, what a concept. Because not just the fact that here you got somebody that, in many ways, there were movie stars, but I don't, and singers, that were very popular. But there was something primal in the way that rock and roll took over. That's what scared the adults. It was a linking at a vibration level, the sound that the man was making. I mean, we can't underestimate the sound that was coming out because it's an energy universe. So this one man puts out a sound that tunes so many kids up to a different frequency, just that sound itself, and a generation. Yes.
And let's not forget his actual use of the body, which was, of course, offensive to so many people who wanted people's bodies caught in a rigidity. They accused him of being of the devil. Rock and roll was of the devil, and they had record-burning parties. But in fact, it's important to have the body be able to be limber, and even in the hip area, because you need that energy to flow. And if you don't, consciousness begins to be locked down. So it's important to recognize that was not a small thing, and it was not about, let's all just be sexual. It was about unlocking what's at the base of the spine and being sure your kundalini can flow upward. So everybody comes in with particular roles, and it's not always that obvious what the underlying shift is, but there are so many people that are here as volunteers now from other, there's probably more volunteers on the planet than native earthers, in my opinion. Seriously, all over, because Earth sent out a big cry for help when the atomic bombs went off. Actually, World War I, that was so ugly and horrible, and then she received so much damage during that. And then World War II, when the kids have found the matches with the bombs, and so and of course it was ripping holes in time-space, which also was noticed by we are much more connected to other planets than we realize. Our concept of the nature of reality is so primitive as to be completely inaccurate. And we were affecting other worlds dramatically when we blew up things with nuclear bombs, atomic bombs. Yeah. And and they noticed. And Earth was, as a spirit, she is alive. It is a female spirit, and she is conscious. When she sent out a cry, there were many people, I say people, but beings. There are many built on the Adam Kadmon template, which is basically a human being. You have 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 eyes. That heard the call, volunteered, went through interviews, actually, from the Galactic Council as to who got to incarnate, because it's basically dropping you into a very primitive, violent world where people's consciousness has been so suppressed that we really, it's from the perspective of peaceful worlds, peaceful star systems, you've really got to have your stuff together to even cope with being here. And there's a lot of us, a whole lot of us, and we're waking up to that. And this is good because we need those abilities. We need the abilities. There's the ability, and to wake up to what those abilities are. And I don't think it's about deciding, I'm a Pleiadian or I'm an Arcturian, because frankly, most of us are specialists that have incarnated all over the place. You can't really say you're in anything if you've been, you might have spent a few lifetimes in the Pleiades, you might have been in Orion for a while, you might have been an Arcturian. So that's not really the important thing. The important thing is to get in touch with who you really are and what you really came here to do. And that takes inward work. What's interesting to me is they seem determined that we should not really be doing inward work because they're attempting to channel our focus into watching violence continually. Violence on TV is just explosive now. And of course, movies, which even carry soundtracks to evoke certain emotional states under the soundtrack, there will be something that deliberately evokes, because they know the frequencies to evoke upset, distress, fear, grief. And as if they control focus, they control what timelines we go down. I think it's very important. And maybe your audience already knows this, but be aware that all of this attempt to bring you all this bad news and show you horror after horror after horror, it is not coincidental that they're bringing you bad news. And of course, they've always claimed, well, this is all people want to see, so if it bleeds, it leads. In truth, we've been programmed to think that that's the priority. And therefore, they will bring you news of a house fire in New Jersey when you live across the country. And it doesn't benefit the poor person that had their house burned down in New Jersey. And it doesn't benefit you to know about it. And you have to question what's the underlying motive. And it's about controlling focus. That's one of the largest magic tricks that they're using to keep you focused. And because when you focus on that type of energy, it attracts you down into that timeline. There are multiple timelines. And the more we control where our focus goes, the more we control which timeline we go down.
Yeah, and that's, to me, the whole power of storytelling. You know, these movies are telling us a story of fear. The newscasts are telling us a story of fear. And saying, oh, well, you know, if it bleeds, it leads, as you say, right? Well, stories of inspiration, stories of courage, stories of loyalty, stories of love are more compelling than it bleeds, it leads stuff. More compelling than the latest, you know, mass shooting. And that's where we have this rich legacy. And when you come, you know, you talk about the Elvis Presley story and situation. I mean, this is something that I'm waking up to because the Sacred Academy of Global Evolution that we've founded here in Crestone is actually producing a documentary of this book, Blue Star Love, about the hidden soul truth of Elvis Presley. So as I've been studying this, you know, that what you were just saying, Falcon, about the sound, you know, that came, that Nancy was saying, and the freeing up of Kundalini energy because he was so limber with his body and all that. Well, as I've been studying and researching and watching a lot of other documentaries on Elvis Presley, just the story of what happened in July of 1954 in Memphis, who you've got this 19-year-old kid. He wants to be a gospel singer, but he's also, you know, he's been sneaking into black churches to listen to African American music. He's been sneaking into black, you know, nightclubs to hear black music. He's got, you know, all of the white gospel sound is part of him, and yet he's just got this draw, you know, to African American music. Hooks up with Sam Phillips at Sun Records. Well, okay, we'll give the kid a try. Brings in a couple of session players. Let's, you know, do an audition for the kid. Oh, he's crooning this or that standard. He's sounding like everybody else. Kid's just trying to, you know, make an impression, you know, get a record cut. And they work 6 hours. It's getting on to midnight. They're about to call it quits. Sam Phillips is like, well, Sam Phillips knows what he's looking for. Sam Phillips at Sun Records was looking somehow, is there a way that we can take African American music, we can take black music and somehow find some white group or some white guy who actually has that and we can blend it. Well, he didn't know it was Elvis Presley. Here's this 19-year-old kid. Everybody's about to go home. Maybe we're going to do one more session. And they take a break. And so Elvis is sitting, you know, a 19-year-old kid wants to make an impression. And just they start banging something out, and the session players are sitting there, and suddenly Elvis is going, that's all right, my mama, any way you do, you know, and suddenly Sam Phillips is out in the hall. He says, hey, what was that? What was that thing you were singing? Let's put this on tape. We're going to cut that. Hey, you guys, you know, and that's all right, mama. That was, you know, rhythm and blues. It was black music, meaning a white singer who had it in his soul, right? So just as the civil rights movement is really starting to rise, suddenly Elvis Presley sparks this merging. You got people like Tom Petty and Bruce Springsteen talking about a wonderful HBO documentary called The Searcher, talking about how Elvis really triggered this consciousness shift where white America suddenly realized that if you were really going to be an American, a full-bodied American, you know, absorbing all the influences that made this country what it is, that African-American music and culture was a huge part of what it means to be an American, that you needed to absorb this and express it. And Elvis Presley was born and raised in Tupelo, Mississippi, and then, in his teen years in Memphis. And yet he was an ardent supporter of Dr. Martin Luther King. And he took some real risks in terms of, like, for example, how his backup singers, African-American female backup singers, he was booked a date in Houston, Texas. They said, hey, you can leave those colored girls at home for this concert, Elvis. So he said, no, we're playing the Astrodome, and actually I'm going to drive in a big convertible with my backup singers in the back seat, with me driving all around your stadium with a nice white blonde girl driving the car as we wave at everybody. That's where Elvis was. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but as a soul who came in from Blue Star Rigel or wherever he was from, the actual impact that he had, not just musically, but culturally, in terms of race relations, that I just love the story that's there, because there's all the information that comes in and the awakening that comes in, and we need to know about all that. But it's like Tyrion Lannister said in Game of Thrones in the final episode. It's like, what unites people? Is it gold? Is it armies? Is it flags? It's like, no, it's stories. There's nothing more powerful than a good story. No enemy can defeat it. No army can stop it. And I think that's what we're, sharing here on Radio 5G, is these stories of inspiration, of consciousness shift, and the idea that there are many thousands, perhaps millions of souls who have come here this particular time to help us all wake up. And it's not as if, we're all super enlightened already. If we're, light worker souls from somewhere else, we're doing our own work to, help wake ourselves up. So to all the folks listening, go ahead, Falcon.
Well, I also want to point out the amazing earther groups that are here now, because people say, oh, I'm not from any star systems. I think I've been here forever. But if you tap into who you have been on many of those occasions, that's a kind of specially chosen group that got to incarnate too. They, when they tap in, often find that they were powerful beings. Like they were here in the earliest civilizations of Earth, or they know how to manipulate reality. They know how to work with portals. Some of them have been priestesses, high priestesses, and priests. And it's at first I used to think perhaps it's just ego. Everybody wants to have been Cleopatra or whatever. But in fact, many people do come from quite distinguished backgrounds. And so they have abilities that they can learn about and employ, amazing healing abilities to shift reality. They know how to work with energy and leadership qualities, which are very important. If you can bring people together to work on an issue, or to just empower them, to get them to believe in themselves and their own abilities, and to explore reality and truth, and just to bring them a new story, as you say, those are very special abilities. They are not minor things. That's usually an indicator that you have a history of being able to do that. You got trained. And so even if you don't think that you're a light worker or a starseed or whatever, don't underestimate who you are. Because if you're here, there were a number of interviews that you had to pass. You're special if you're here. Trust me. It's when a planet is going through major shift, and this is the turn of an age. We're going from the Kali Yuga into the Satya Yuga. And it's a period in which many things are going to come to light. A lot of people are going to freak out from it. The people that have had their heads in the sand. When the real facts come out, if you've been trusting that government is here for your higher good, and they're all about to be that's been their purpose, and they've been looking out for you like good parents, and that you've been getting the truth on the nightly news. And when this stuff really comes out, or the economic system finally does crash from all the fiat currencies, and people still believe that that's the thing they have to rely on, anybody who's farther along will be called into service to help calm everybody else down, say, were you really so crazy about the way things were going? Because I think we can make a better system. And there will be many beautiful new ways to create local government or systems in which people are more equitably taken care of, even tribal situations where everybody just does what they're good at and takes care of everybody. And you don't have old people living in isolation and poverty, and you don't have kids being abused because they've got multiple adults helping raise them. There's so many ways that any kind of collapse can be actually an amazing blessing. Anything can be much better. So it's those people, it's you guys that are listening. Realize that you have the ability to help say, no, look at the possibilities here. Look at what we can make that could be better. Sometimes a rotted old house has to fall. It has to. If a religion is just teaching you to hate people, how is it serving life? If a government is just exploiting you and not taking care of the earth and of the people that they're supposedly serving, well, yeah, it's time for a house when it's that rotten. It needs to fall. And you can't have an entirely new, beautiful and different thing happen on the same site unless the old falls. So as much comes to light in coming months, and especially leading into 2020, it's the people that have had that inner vision and realize, there's much better possibilities, and you don't have to look at things in a dark way. Change is opportunity.
Yeah, there's a wonderful song by a singer-songwriter named Kirtana, K-I-R-T like Tom, A-N-A. It's called I Said That I Would Sing. That's the name of the song. Look it up, folks, on YouTube or whatever. And it's about a soul out there somewhere in the cosmos getting a call, oh, come be a volunteer on Earth, and here's what you got to do, and here's the interviews you got to pass, and putting out a call for volunteers to help raise the vibration. And she sings, I was asked when I applied to name some service I could bring. She says, I think service should be joyous, so I said that I would sing. And it's one of the most moving songs I've ever heard. It just describes what it's like to come here to this place at this particular time. It's not easy. And, of course, you get down here and you got amnesia. You forget where you're from. That's the idea.
Yeah, that really helps.
Yeah, well, that's great. What fun. So, yeah, it can be pretty rough. But then, as you say, Falcon, when, the houses of state and of finance come crashing down, the ways that will work are already being put in place. The principles of Ubuntu, which is the African word for just simply taking care of each other. I know a guy, he's a pretty close friend of mine, who was in Egypt for both revolutions. Both, when Mubarak was overthrown, and then when the Muslim Brotherhood government that replaced him was also overthrown. 30 million people took to the streets for that one in Egypt. So you saw the police state collapse. He saw the police state that had existed since the assassination of Anwar Sadat when Mubarak came in. He saw it collapse. Everyone there saw it collapse. The mechanisms of repression, the corrupt police state suddenly vanished. And those guys who had been part of it, who had served it, they vanished too, because they knew that the people were now free, and so they're like hiding out in their houses. They don't, their backup is gone, their power is gone, and they had, just like the old tactic, they'd kept everybody in line by pitting people against each other. No, you need, the Coptics and the Muslims, you Coptics need us to protect you from the radical Muslims and the Muslim Brotherhood. And, well, when all that disappeared, suddenly human nature came out. And yeah, human nature's got some bad aspects, but what he saw, this friend of mine, he said it restored his faith in human nature because people took care of each other. As those revolutions were going down, and in the months afterwards, the Muslims would gather and protect the Christians while the Christians prayed, and the Christians would gather and protect the Muslims while the Muslims prayed. And they'd form like spontaneous neighborhood committees to like, oh, go check on the old lady who's got the heart problem, make sure she's okay. Is the water okay? Okay, we're going to form a patrol that's just going to make sure there aren't vigilantes and, people breaking into things and hurting people. And that, surprise, surprise, when left to ourselves, we actually just take care of each other. We actually pool our resources to make sure everybody's okay. And it's not communism, and it's not socialism. You still get to have free enterprise, open a shop if you want, do whatever expresses yourself. And oh, by the way, we just take care of each other because we're human. We're a human family. That's the consciousness that we're waking up to, that many places is already being practiced. And, as upheaval increases, as it's likely to in the short term, that's what we're going to be realizing is there for us. And the souls, who've been working it are there to say, hey, everybody, calm down. We've got this covered. We actually have figured out how to keep the water running. We've actually figured out how to have a food bank so nobody's starving. And then, we'll get through this together. That's what's happening already.
And of course, my question to most people would be, are you really upset that you lost those low-wage jobs that you hated? Because you basically, in many ways, if it happens that way, were you really that thrilled with the way things were going? You had basically a wage slave kind of life in which you were kept in much debt that you could never climb out of. If you went to college in particular, which everybody told you had to go to college, and then you come out and you owe more money than you could possibly pay in decades, you can't say to yourself, oh, well, but that was so wonderful. All you had was that sense of security, which was basically based in a false narrative anyway. So how much more happiness could you have if you were doing something that you really loved and getting more personal interaction with your neighbors who are truly caring and having more free time? Or even if you're not having more free time, you're not dashing off to 3 part-time jobs that you hated, all of them. I think it's just important to do a reality check. Anytime somebody starts singing about the good old days, how much of that was a mirage about how good it really was. So I think there's possibilities here, and I'm so glad to hear you talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it's like that line, is it Thoreau or Emerson who said that, and this is 150 years ago, 160, 70 years ago, that, in America, most people are living lives of quiet desperation. And especially now, and as you say, it's that one low wage, barely get it by a job. You have to have 2 or 3, just to be able to make ends meet. And this is not accidental. This is a designed control system so that we don't wake up, so that we're too tired and stressed out and dumbed down to wake up. And of course, this is where 5G comes in, which is increasing that exponentially. Well, let's talk about that for a little bit in terms of what we can share with people about the effective practices to raise your own vibration and others and the collective vibration that can be the ultimate shift that in the long run defeats 5G. And it's not just about 5G. Then it's about restoring the biosphere, reversing the 6th extinction event, which is unfolding around us. There are gifts we've been given, practices that are already in place. The Holy Grail Vortex comes to mind for me that I shared last week, the work of Mary Hardy, and what she just openly refers to as a Knights Templar mission. She calls, the knights and ladies of her movement that practice this very powerful protocol called the Holy Grail Vortex, which works with the Earth's energies, works with compelling evidence that it breaks through the control grid. It breaks through the energetic control grid that has been put in place. And one very good indication that this is so is they go to power places, they go to monolithic sites, they go to Marian cathedrals, Stonehenge, Templar cathedrals that were chosen by those builders because of the ley lines. And they practice the Holy Grail Vortex there. They're breaking through the power grid simply by joining hands in a circle and practicing this Holy Grail Vortex. And within about 30 minutes, they're getting buzzed by black helicopters again and again and again. They're getting, black SUVs are showing up, or some phony electrician's truck parks 30 yards away, sets up traffic cones to monitor them. It's because they monitor the control grid. They monitor the energy grid that they've put in place to clamp down humanity's consciousness. And when it's getting broken through by human beings asserting our sacred sovereignty and engaging in some of these practices, they're trying to clamp it down, but guess what? They can't, because all we're doing is just gathering in a field, holding hands, and practicing a sacred protocol. So that's Mary Hardy, by the way, folks. If you want to do a YouTube search, she's got it's a very simple practice, the Holy Grail Vortex, working with the energies of Gaia in a way that lifts the vibration, that breaks the control grid and frees the bloodstream of Gaia to work with us to reverse all this stuff. Nancy, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on all this, because as you've shared with a lot of people, in the past on your show and other shows on Cosmic Reality, about your relationship to Gaia and what you see happening on this level with 5G and the other things that we need to heal.
Actually, I'd like to hear what Falcon has to say, because I really like I like the way that Falcon thinks. So Falcon.
Thank you. I'm always looking for new things, because I believe that as we seek answers and trust that they'll show up, they do. That's because of the new role of the new age. It's an interesting thing. You live by following the breadcrumbs much more than laying out plan A and then we're going to do B and then we're going to do C. You follow the breadcrumbs. It's more fun, but it takes a lot of trust, and the ego has trouble getting used to it at first. But I was being very affected by EMF and 5G, and not even 5G, but too much 4G. And RF coming in from my neighbor's Wi-Fi, and it was making me stunned and dazed and having trouble thinking clearly, and of course not functioning well physically. And I spoke with a gentleman from the Lorian Foundation, Lorian, and he was teaching a class. And one of the groups that he has worked with is the She. Sidhe, and the She is not the fairies, it's not the elves. It's a group that broke off from us much, much earlier in history. If you could think of them in a way as humans that decided not to incarnate. They're involved in creativity. They help to bring trees into form, or stones, or whatever they want to build with consciousness, castles, jewels, whatever. So they're in a different frequency, which is outside most people's visual range, but they're very real. And they talk about what we as a race need to tap back into to start regaining our power. And they said that joy and hope and creativity in particular, they said if you lose the joy of creating, that will be a greater loss to you than even the environment, believe it or not, because then you lose the power to shift it. So anyway, it's fascinating material. But when I spoke with him, I told him about the problems I was having. I said, I want to fight 5G. And the focusing on it in itself is a problem, because then I'm helping to anchor it more into reality. But frankly, I've got to focus on it to get myself more functional. And I said, can the She do anything to help shift this? Can they do something for my fields? Can a field shield of some kind be implemented? Because it has to be stopped. It's going to destroy the environment and everything. And of course, it's not going to be functional to try to teach a shield technique to everybody. We need to stop the darn mess. But he said he checked in, internally, and he says, yes, they can. We'll work with your body elemental, and the earth. And so they set up a protective kind of shield field. So if people will work with their body elemental, everybody has an elemental. It's a very a fundamental consciousness in second dimension, and it helps to keep your body operating basically in the right way. So with the body elemental and the help of the She and the spirit of the earth, if people will please go internally so that you can have maximum positive effect. I'm certainly not suggesting this as a solution to 5G. It just makes you functional enough within what you're being bombarded with that you can continue to do the good work you came here to do. But check in. And of course, that does require that you meditate. If you're not a person that's been meditating and going in to see who you can contact. The problem is, at first, if you're being really bombarded with EMF, it also interferes with your psychic abilities. And that's why I had to approach Tim in the first place. Timothy. He prefers to be called Timothy. So try that. Try it. If you're being really snowed, you're dazed, having fatigue, maybe sleep problems, just can't remember things well, that is very often a symptom of too much EMF and RF. And it's important also not to get dazed by the misinformation that all of this is, quote, ascension symptoms. This is a misleading of the lightworker community. People will say, oh, yes, you feel all these horrible symptoms because it's just upgrades coming in. Well, we are getting upgrades. The photonic, we're in the photon belt now. Everybody's DNA is being upgraded, organs, and it's exhausting sometimes for the body. But fatigue, on occasion, might be normal. If you're showing all the symptoms of EMF bombardment and RF, you need to find out what the real situation is and look, and start working to solve it for your functioning so that you can continue to, shift the outer situation. But
yes, you need to get shungite.
Yeah, and I'm sure you want to talk a little about shungite, because that is a stone spirit, an ancient one, who is now apparently symbiotically working with the spirit of silver. And between the two of them, Nancy, you were explaining to me yesterday, it seems they've created a marvelous situation. Do you know in shamanism, stones are considered the elders? They're the elder brothers of consciousness. They were the first to incarnate here. And I have talked with stones since I was a child, and didn't talk about it to other people, of course, because my parents would have thought I was a lunatic. But they have a lot to say, and they're darn wise. So shungite and silver have paired up. Silver holds open the gate, I believe you said, to the quantum field, and then shungite can do the work on a more steady basis that will address the particular type of wave that we're being hit with.
Yes.
Nancy, you want to talk about that?
Well, shungite, I go out there and I say, and I own shungite store, so it's like I could make a lot of money if I said, oh, yeah, it'll protect you against 5G. Go get a lot of it from me. I could do that. No, I'm not going to do that because it's not true. But what is true is that if you get yourself in a shungite environment, that you've got shungite around you, you will attenuate, change the environment from the 4G. And once you've done that, then your brain begins to uncloud. Your chakras begin to come into alignment. You just are now in a bubble of shungite energy, a cosmic energy, that will allow us to take the next step, which is shut down 5G. It's insane. But to take what we know now about energy and the energy universe and change everything so fast, because everything that we would change it to is already there. And, that's what we can't lose our focus on, is that there is a wonderful reality where we feel joy and contentment, and that we're creative beings, that exists. Focus on that one. Now, you don't want to lose track of the fact that you got to make a story as to how you got from the Matrix reality into the new reality that's as old can be. Garden of Eden type thing, but not the Garden of Eden, but with the Adam and Eve understanding the difference between good and evil. That was the problem, is that they really didn't understand the difference between good and evil. And so we took this story, this journey through, it seems, eternity, to get to a point where we now understand the difference between good and evil, because it's so blatantly being demonstrated to us. And I don't want to get into a discussion of good and evil. It's just what works and what doesn't work. What doesn't work is 5G. What works is working together and with nature to create an environment where the technology is assisting us to communicate and to maintain respect and admiration, and working together with the rest of our family to unify us, not to be able to control us. So that's what I think.
And with the animals as well, because we have by nature the ability to communicate with animals. It's truly not that difficult. The hardest thing to overcome is the belief that you can't, and I can teach it in 10 minutes. And the plants as well. There are many. When we start reconnecting in a spirit of love and respect, they have been struggling to get through to us and help us straighten out the mess. We're like the younger brother who is taking very.
Did you just drop off, Falcon? Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks like she might have just cut out there.
Oh, she might have lost her cell phone connection. Well,
yeah, well,
at least we got to 2 minutes before the end of the show. It doesn't say that she disconnected on the Skype. Anyway, would you like to? We'll get Falcon's contact information, and Falcon is going to start doing an hour show for Cosmic Reality. It's still in the planning, still in the working stage, but she's going to let her voice and what she knows. She knows so much about so many different subjects in details that she's going to put together a show that we're going to start doing. So we're going to have a lot more of Falcon, and I don't have her contact information. I was just about to ask her about it. So you want to say something else?
Well, other than that, it's great news that Cosmic Reality Radio is going to feature Falcon Britt with her own show. Because, I just love to listen to her in the flow of everything that she brings to the table, everything she's learned and practiced. And, it's not just head talk. This is a person who's embodied it and learned and struggled, and it's just part of who she is. So that's just a huge gift to be able to bring, and that is great news. So I look forward to that being a reality and sharing that with everybody. So we are right at the 2:00 hour Eastern time for wrapping up the show. So we just want to thank Falcon. We're sorry we got cut off from her. This is Radio 5G, which is a joint project of Cosmic Reality Radio and the Sacred Academy of Global Evolution in Crestone, Colorado. And we've been so glad to have Falcon Britt with us this week. And so this is Michael Henry Dunn with my esteemed co-host, Nancy Hopkins, signing off. And let's just keep up the hope, the awakening, because there is so much amazing awakening of spirit and increase of light that is happening. It's not just happy talk, folks. There's a lot of grim realities out there, but the light is winning and will win. So we will see you next week. God bless. Bye for now.